Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I put up a video yesterday about the situation in Wisconsin where a bunch of people left one hospital to go work at another. And the first hospital sued the second hospital in an attempt to stop them from hiring away those workers and also to make those workers stay. Now, the workers are at-will workers, which means there's no contract of employment between them and the first hospital. And Wisconsin is an at-will state where you can do that. So there's a lot of confusion about this. People were asking me what right did the hospital have to try to sue to stop that? And as many people pointed out, probably none. It's just one of those things. And unfortunately, a lot of people just think, well, let's sue somebody. We're not happy. Let's sue somebody. So I pointed out in a rather lengthy video a lot of the different things that went into that. And what had happened was, on Friday, the first hospital ran into court and got a temporary restraining order, which is a form of an injunction that is, by its very nature, temporary. And what that means is that the court puts it in place to kind of hold the status quo and then says, we'll hold a hearing as soon as we can to decide if it's going to be permanent or not. So the first hearing was on Friday, and the judge said, I'm going to put the TRO in place until Monday. We'll have a hearing on Monday. It is Monday. The judge and the court just had its hearing. So I'm here making a special edition of Lehto's Law because there's an update. If I don't get this update out right now, my inbox is going to explode overnight. It's going to go thermonuclear, and I don't want that to happen. So here's the deal. Judge lifts restraining order against Ascension in dispute with ThedaCare over employees. The judge said the TRO is dissolved, no injunction. So the judge did what I believe is legally correct, but here's the point. I had said what I thought the judge was doing, and you can check the video if you think I'm making this up. I said I think the judge is going to put the TRO in place on Friday in the hopes that the parties can resolve their differences over the weekend so that on Monday they can come into court and say, Your Honor, we've resolved it. There's no need to have a hearing. That didn't happen. I had some people contact me and say, Steve, you understand that that right there doesn't make any sense either because hospitals are open on weekends. And I said, I understand that. I'm not saying that anything the judge did was the best legal rulings of all time. I'm simply saying that was probably the thought process. Turns out I was right on that also, according to the story here from Brian Curran from Fox 11 News out of Appleton, WLUK. Lucky TV. Judge lifts restraining order against Ascension in dispute with ThedaCare over employees. A judge ended the temporary restraining order Monday in a workforce dispute between two hospital systems. After Ascension Northeast Wisconsin hired 7 of ThedaCare's interventional radiology and cardiovascular team members who'd worked at ThedaCare's Level 2 Trauma and Stroke Center in Neenah, Theda filed suit against Ascension. Last week, a county judge, Mark McGinnis, put a temporary restraining order in place telling Ascension to make certain staff available to ThedaCare to ensure critical care continued while the case went on. But as I pointed out, in America, the 13th Amendment says specifically that indentured servitude is illegal. So the judge said you must make them available, but the judge could not order them to go back to work. It's a fine line, I understand that, but that's the point. So today, apparently, the judge took testimony before he made this ruling. There were several aspects of testimony on Monday, which included testimony from some of the 7 employees about why they chose to apply to work at Ascension and how ThedaCare had declined to match Ascension's offer, a doctor about the impact of the loss of those workers to providing effective healthcare in urgent situations, and staff from both systems about the hiring process. So here we are in a situation in Wisconsin, an at-will state where people can be hired and fired at will. Works both ways, by the way. You can quit anytime you want. They can fire you anytime they want, generally speaking. So the workers said that they had taken the offer from the other place to the first employer and said, by the way, can you match this? And Hospital A said, no, we cannot match that. So then they said, fine, we're leaving. When they said they were leaving, Hospital A runs into court and says, stop them from leaving. It's going to mess us up without them. Well, you should have thought of that before because you could have matched the offer. You don't want to match the offer, but you want them to stay? Okay, that's the tension here, as we say. After Monday's testimony, Judge McGinnis said ThedaCare did not meet all of the required prongs to keep the temporary injunction in place. And so there are a bunch of different factors, I talked about this in my video, that the judge will look at to see whether or not a TRO should be turned into a permanent injunction. And several of those things are the likelihood of success on the merits, the harm that will befall the parties if it's not granted, versus the harm that will befall the other party if it is granted, and whether or not an adequate remedy exists other than an injunction. There's a whole bunch of these factors that go into this. So, and I'll get to that in a second. I had a thought. Don't worry, I'll remember. So, could or should ThedaCare and Ascension get together and work in this transition period? I was hoping so over the weekend, which is exactly what I said, thank you very much, and I'll continue to hope so. But I'm not able to craft any injunction that would require or limit Ascension without, I think, creating more issues or more friction or taking away the ability that they have to provide healthcare services, the judge said. The decision means that the 7 medical workers can start work immediately at Ascension, which is Hospital B in the hypotheticals I described earlier. The lawsuit itself continues. So apparently, Hospital A is still going to continue suing Hospital B, saying you poached our employees. And the use of the word poached in that sentence makes it sound bad until you realize there's not really a law against hiring people in an at-will state who are available to be hired. But that's another story for another day. ThedaCare owns hospitals in Appleton and Neenah, among others. Ascension's hospitals include St. Elizabeth in Appleton and Mercy in Oshkosh. So Oshkosh is just a fun town to say, just like Escanaba or Kalamazoo. And during my long video, this is the part I was going to say a second ago. During my long video a couple days ago, I gave an example where I said, here's an example of when you'd issue an injunction and a temporary restraining order. And I gave the example of somebody who rents a ballroom and then it discovers later that other people could rent the same ballroom and make money. So they talked the landlord into breaking the agreement with the first person. And I got somebody who wrote me a really weird note and said, Steve, that example you gave was wrong. And I said, well, no, the example I gave you is actually what they teach you on day 1 of a class you take called Remedies in law school. It's actually a very, very well-known example. I changed a few facts, but there is a famous example of somebody, and this goes back to England, common law, old days, where somebody rented something in London and someone else talked that person into breaking the agreement. And I said, no, that's a great example. It's one of the best known examples in the books on remedies regarding injunctions. This guy goes, Steve, the workers in Wisconsin don't have contracts. And I could hear him rolling his eyes in the email, despite the fact you can't hear an email. But trust me. And he goes, they didn't have contracts. And I go, I wasn't saying that the example I'm giving is identical because, number one, my example also doesn't involve a hospital. It's not happening in Wisconsin. I mean, I was simply giving an example where the court would say injunctive relief is appropriate. And in case people don't get this, although out of the 200,000 people who watched the video, I only got the one person who didn't understand it. You might say, Steve, let's go back to your example where you have the ballroom in town and you have talked this person into letting you use it on a day of particular importance. Someone else comes along and talks them into breaking the agreement with you. So you go to court and get an injunction to stop them from letting the other person use it. What good would that do? Because if they can't use it and you don't use it, everybody loses. And then you just sue them for damages. What's the point of the injunction? The point of the injunction is that it would force the landlord to realize, oh, I can't let anyone use it but Steve. I'll let Steve use it. Now I get to use it. I'm back where I belong, which is the place I was before somebody interfered with my contract. And if you look at it from the court's viewpoint, that's how you cause the least amount of damage economically to all parties. So if you look at me and the landlord and the other person and all of the different configurations that can happen there, the one that makes the most sense is for me to have my original contract honored. However, the judge can't force people to do things sometimes, but they can block things. It's easier to block things sometimes. And so by blocking the landlord or the owner of the facility from letting anyone else use it, it makes sense to let me use it. So to mitigate their damages, they'll honor the first contract, which is what the court would like to do in the first place. So I was simply giving an example of when injunctive relief makes sense. It does not matter if there's a contract or not a contract for them to get injunctive relief. Injunctive relief is simply a reference to when a court will order somebody to do something or not do something because pure money damages or monetary damages won't make the parties whole or put them in the positions they should be in if everything went according to the law. So that's all I was trying to get at there. So the one person is confused. Sorry about that. But whenever I give an example, and I say, for example, and I give an example, I'll get one person who says, Steve, your example's wrong because, well, I'm not going to give the case from the story as an example because that wouldn't make any sense. I'd just be repeating myself. So I give an example, it's a parallel. So ask yourself, if Steve says that an apple is like a banana, you can say, no, they're different colors. Well, if I'm saying they're both fruits, you'd understand that, right? They're both fruit, apple, banana, right? Okay, sorry. I've gone far afield here. Back to the story. The judge has lifted the restraining order. The temporary injunction is no more, and it could have been turned into a permanent injunction, but it was not. And as I said, my suspicion was, on Friday, that the court was putting leverage on these people in an attempt to get them to settle the case. They didn't settle the case, and a lot of people are still going to say, Steve, he had no right to do that. Well, courts often do things that would get overturned on appeal if they'd gone up on appeal. And I suspect the judge thought, I've got these parties here in front of me, and it's Friday, maybe they can resolve it by Monday. Whether that was right, I didn't say that. I simply said I suspected that's how he was thinking. So the workers can now go to greener pastures, and hopefully Hospital A, as I keep referring to them as, hopefully Hospital A will realize the error of their ways and perhaps pay their employees a little bit better or treat them a little bit better. And by the way, a lot of people in the comments below my video said, Steve, you understand, this isn't really about the 7 employees. What it's about is all the employees who haven't left. And so they're going to think twice now because they're going to say, wait a second. Yeah, those guys won, but it was ugly. It was an ugly mess. Who wants to go through that? So you know something? I might not be happy here, but I don't want to get sued either. So that very well could be what they're thinking. But again, we're speculating as to what other people are thinking. But the good news is that I actually called that one correctly because the judge did say, could or should Theta Care and Ascension get together and work in this transition period? I was hoping so over the weekend. So there you go. Judge lifts restraining order. The workers can go to their new jobs. I wish them well. Brian Curhan wrote this for Fox 11 News. That's your update. Questions or comments, put them below this. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law.
The most important thing is to look ahead. The past is your anchor.